June 14, 1942, 14:35 hours, 12 miles west of Tobruk, Libya. Lieutenant Klaus Hartmann commanded a Panzer III, advancing with his platoon across open desert toward what appeared to be a hastily abandoned British position. His tank had been upgraded with additional frontal armor, 50 millimeters rather than the original 30, making it substantially more resistant to the British 2-pounder anti-tank guns that German tankers had learned to treat with casual contempt. Those guns could penetrate Panzer III armor at close range if they hit from optimal angles, but at any distance beyond 200 meters or when firing at frontal armor, the 2-pounders achieved minimal effect. German tankers had learned that they could advance confidently against British infantry positions, trusting their armor to protect them while their own guns destroyed defensive positions. Hartmann spotted what appeared to be a British gun crew establishing position behind a low sand berm approximately 300 meters ahead. Through his commander's cupola optics, he could see the gun being positioned. It looked small, possibly another 2-pounder, or perhaps one of the larger guns that British forces occasionally deployed, but which required substantial crews and couldn't be moved quickly. Hartmann wasn't concerned. His tank's armor would stop any gun that size, and his 75mm main gun could destroy the position before British gunners could engage effectively. "That thing?" Hartmann said to his gunner, observing the British crew through his optics. "That's a toy. Maintain course, prepare to engage once we're in effective range." The Panzer III continued forward at steady pace. Hartmann was positioning for optimal shot angle when the British gun fired. He heard the sharp crack, distinctly different from the duller report of 2-pounder guns he was familiar with, and simultaneously felt his tank shudder violently. The shell struck the Panzer's frontal armor just below the main gun, and instead of deflecting or fragmenting against the surface as 2-pounder rounds typically did, it penetrated cleanly, punching through the 50mm plate as though the armor wasn't present. Hartmann never understood what happened next. The penetrating shell struck something inside the fighting compartment, ammunition storage or mechanical components, and the interior of his tank became fire and fragmentation in an instant. He was killed before he could order his crew to bail out, before he could transmit warning to other tanks in his platoon, before he could process that the small British gun he'd dismissed as inadequate had just killed him and his crew with a single shot fired at range where his tank was supposed to be invulnerable. The remaining panzers in Hartmann's platoon halted immediately, their commanders recognizing that advancing toward the British position meant accepting fire from a gun that could apparently penetrate their frontal armor at ranges they'd believed were safe. The platoon withdrew, leaving Hartmann's burning tank in the desert, and reported to battalion that British forces were employing new anti-tank weapons with capabilities that exceeded intelligence assessments. The report described the gun as small-caliber weapon with unexpectedly high penetration capability at medium range, and recommended increased caution when engaging British defensive positions until the new weapon's characteristics could be properly evaluated. German intelligence analysts reading the report were initially skeptical. British anti-tank guns had been consistently inferior to German equivalents throughout the North Africa campaign. The 2-pounder was outdated and ineffective, except at close range. British forces occasionally deployed larger guns, but those were specialized weapons that weren't issued to infantry units widely. The concept that British forces had deployed new anti-tank gun that could penetrate up-armored Panzer III frontally at 300 meters, that seemed implausible. More likely, Hartmann's tank had been struck by artillery, or the penetration had occurred at closer range than surviving crew members estimated, or the hit had been exceptionally lucky shot against weak point in the armor. But similar reports continued arriving from other units. British defensive positions were destroying German tanks at ranges and under conditions where two-pounders shouldn't be effective. The guns appeared smaller than German anti-tank weapons, but achieved penetration that suggested much larger caliber. German tank casualties in sectors where these new guns operated increased noticeably despite German tactical advantages in armor quality and firepower. Within weeks, German intelligence confirmed that British forces had deployed new 57mm anti-tank gun designated the six-pounder in British nomenclature, and that early assessments of the weapon's combat effectiveness had been dangerously incorrect. The armor race crisis. Britain's decision to develop and deploy the six-pounder emerged from recognition that existing anti-tank weapons were becoming ineffective against German armor improvements that were occurring faster than British weapons development could match. The two-pounder anti-tank gun had been adequate when introduced in the late 1930s against tanks with armor thickness measuring 20 to 30 millimeters. But German tank development accelerated during the war's first years, with progressive armor upgrades that made two-pounder penetration marginal even at close range. The Panzer III received frontal armor upgrades from 30 millimeters to 50 millimeters. The Panzer IV, originally designed as infantry support vehicle with relatively light armor, was being up-armored and equipped with longer guns that made it formidable tank destroyer. German tank doctrine was evolving to emphasize armor protection and gun power, creating vehicles that could engage British tanks at ranges where British guns couldn't penetrate effectively. British two-pounder guns could still kill German tanks if gunners could achieve flank shots or if engagement ranges were very close, under 100 meters. But achieving those favorable conditions required tactical situations that German forces could avoid by maintaining distance and maneuvering to prevent British guns from achieving flank positions. The practical result was that British anti-tank guns were becoming less effective as primary tank killers, forcing British forces to rely increasingly on artillery, air support, or tank-versus-tank combat to stop German armor. The requirement for new anti-tank gun was urgent. British infantry needed organic weapon that could engage German tanks frontally at combat ranges, 200 to 400 meters, without requiring perfect tactical conditions or exceptional luck. The gun needed to be portable enough that infantry units could deploy it without requiring heavy tractors or specialized transport. It needed sufficient armor penetration to defeat German tanks reliably rather than requiring multiple hits or optimal shot placement. And it needed to be simple enough for rapid production and for employment by soldiers who'd received basic anti-tank training rather than requiring specialist crews. The 57mm caliber represented compromise between competing requirements. Larger guns would have better penetration, but would be too heavy for infantry to manhandle into position. Smaller guns would be more portable, but might not penetrate upgraded German armor reliably. The 57mm round provided sufficient mass and velocity to defeat German armor at useful ranges, while keeping the complete gun system light enough that six-man crew could move it tactically and deploy it quickly when German tanks appeared. The engineering balance. The six-pounder's design prioritized penetration performance and tactical mobility over features that would have made it more impressive-looking but less effective in combat employment. The gun barrel was relatively short compared to German anti-tank weapons, approximately 43 calibers length, meaning the barrel was 43 times the internal diameter. German guns typically used longer barrels to achieve higher muzzle velocities, but longer barrels made weapons heavier and more difficult to conceal. The six-pounder achieved adequate muzzle velocity, approximately 2,700 feet per second, with standard armor-piercing ammunition, using shorter barrel that reduced weight and made the gun easier to hide in defensive positions. The carriage was deliberately low profile, keeping the gun close to the ground when deployed. This made the weapon more difficult for German tank commanders to spot at distance. A six-pounder, in hull-down position or partially concealed by terrain features, was nearly invisible until it fired. The low profile also made the gun easier to dig in, allowing crews to create positions where only the gun barrel protruded above ground level, providing substantial protection for the crew and making the position extremely difficult to suppress with tank fire. The weight, approximately 1 ton for the gun and carriage, was light enough that crews could manhandle the weapon short distances to adjust position or respond to changing tactical situations. Heavier guns required mechanical transport to move tactically, limiting where they could be positioned and making it difficult to displace when German forces attempted to suppress the position with return fire. The six-pounder could be repositioned by its crew within minutes, allowing British forces to fire, displace, and re-engage from new position before German tanks could effectively respond. The ammunition was compact and relatively light, approximately 6 pounds for the projectile, hence the gun's designation. Crews could carry sufficient ammunition to sustain engagement without requiring immediate resupply. The rounds were also simple enough that loading could be conducted quickly under combat stress. The breech mechanism was robust and reliable, and the fixed ammunition, where projectile and propellant charge were combined in single cartridge, simplified the loading sequence and reduced opportunity for errors during high-stress combat. North Africa validation. The desert campaigns provided ideal environment for six-pounder employment, where long sight distances and minimal terrain features created conditions where the gun's penetration capability and concealment characteristics could be exploited effectively. British defensive doctrine in North Africa emphasized creating strong points that German armor would have to approach across open ground, while British gunners engaged from prepared positions. The six-pounder fit this doctrine perfectly. Guns could be positioned behind low rises or berms, creating hull-down positions where German tanks wouldn't see them until the range had closed to where penetration was guaranteed. British gunners learned to hold fire until German tanks were committed to their approach and couldn't easily reverse course, then engage with rapid, accurate fire that destroyed tanks before German crews could locate the firing positions. The penetration performance exceeded German expectations based on the gun's appearance. At 300 meters, typical engagement range in desert fighting, the six-pounder could penetrate 50 millimeters of armor reliably, sufficient to defeat Panzer III frontal armor and Panzer IV side armor. At 200 meters, penetration increased to approximately 60 millimeters, making even up-armored panzers vulnerable to frontal shots. German tanks that advanced confidently, trusting their armor to protect them as it had against two-pounders, discovered that six-pounder rounds punched through their frontal plates and caused catastrophic damage to crew and internal systems. The psychological impact on German tank crews was substantial. They could no longer assume that British infantry anti-tank guns were ineffective at medium range. Every British defensive position potentially contained six-pounders that could kill German tanks before the tanks could engage effectively. German tankers became more cautious, advancing more slowly, using supporting infantry to screen for anti-tank positions, calling for artillery to suppress suspected gun positions before tanks moved into potential firing zones. The caution slowed German advances and reduced the tactical mobility that had been German armor's primary advantage in desert warfare. El Alamein operations demonstrated the weapon's effectiveness during large-scale combat, where numerous six-pounders could be concentrated to create defensive belts that German armor couldn't penetrate without accepting prohibitive casualties. British positions bristled with six-pounders positioned in depth, creating zones where German tanks would be engaged by multiple guns simultaneously from different angles. German forces attempting to break through British lines found themselves taking fire from six-pounders that they couldn't locate visually, that appeared from unexpected positions, and that achieved kill rates that exceeded what intelligence assessments had predicted based on the gun's caliber and appearance. European theater operations. The Normandy campaign and subsequent fighting in northwest Europe demonstrated that six-pounder effectiveness wasn't limited to desert warfare, but translated successfully to closed terrain where different tactical challenges existed. The bocage terrain of Normandy created engagement conditions that favored ambush weapons with good short-range penetration. Hedgerows limited visibility to 100 or 200 meters, creating numerous positions where six-pounders could be concealed and where German tanks would have minimal warning before being engaged. British defensive positions incorporated six-pounders covering critical routes, roads, trails, gaps in hedgerows, ensuring that German armor attempting to advance would be engaged at close range, where penetration was guaranteed and where German crews would have difficulty locating the firing positions before being destroyed. The urban combat in French towns and villages showed six-pounders employed in building firing positions, creating fortified locations where guns could engage German armor moving through streets, while crew enjoyed substantial protection. The guns would be positioned to fire down streets or across squares, creating kill zones that German armor couldn't cross without being engaged. German forces learned that attempting to force passage through towns defended by six-pounders meant accepting tank losses that couldn't be justified tactically. Often, it was more effective to bypass defended towns rather than fight through positions where British anti-tank guns had every advantage. The defensive battles during German counterattacks demonstrated the weapon's value for holding ground against armor-heavy assaults. British defensive positions could be held by infantry equipped with six-pounders against German tank attacks that would have overrun positions defended only by small arms and light weapons. The psychological benefit was substantial. British infantry knew they possessed capability to stop German tanks, making them more willing to hold positions under pressure and reducing the likelihood of defensive collapses that occurred when troops believed they had no effective anti-tank capability. The weapon's limitations became more apparent against heavier German armor. Tiger tanks with frontal armor exceeding 100 millimeters couldn't be penetrated reliably by six-pounders at typical combat ranges. Panther tanks with sloped frontal armor were similarly resistant to frontal attack. British gunners learned to engage these heavier tanks from the flank when possible, or to disable them through track hits that immobilized the vehicles rather than attempting direct frontal engagement. The tactical adjustment acknowledged that no infantry anti-tank gun could be expected to defeat the heaviest German armor frontally, but that six-pounders could still contribute by immobilizing heavy tanks or by engaging the more numerous Panzer III and IV variants that remained German armor's backbone. The final assessment: Klaus Hartmann died believing he'd been killed by artillery or exceptional lucky shot, rather than by standard British anti-tank gun engaging at typical combat range. His error, shared by German tankers throughout the North Africa campaign and beyond, cost German forces numerous tanks that advanced confidently against weapons they'd dismissed as inadequate. The six-pounder represented British weapons development philosophy that prioritized practical effectiveness over impressive specifications or technological sophistication. The gun wasn't revolutionary. It used conventional design principles, fired standard armor-piercing ammunition, incorporated no exotic materials or novel engineering. It was simply well-designed weapon, optimized for its intended role, produced in sufficient quantities to matter operationally, and employed by troops who'd been trained to use it effectively under combat conditions. The German dismissal of the weapon reflected assumption that effectiveness correlated with size and appearance, that small guns were inherently less dangerous than large guns, that weapons that didn't look impressive weren't serious threats. Combat demonstrated that penetration capability depended on projectile velocity and design rather than purely on caliber, that tactical mobility often mattered more than maximum range or largest possible warhead, and that weapon systems optimized for specific roles could outperform more general-purpose designs that attempted to address all possible requirements simultaneously. The six-pounder succeeded because it solved specific problem. British infantry needed organic anti-tank weapon that could defeat German armor reliably at combat ranges, and because it was designed specifically to address that problem rather than attempting to be multi-purpose weapon that would be adequate for various roles but optimal for none. The focused design created weapon that excelled at its primary mission, that could be produced economically and that soldiers could employ effectively without requiring exceptional skill or perfect tactical conditions. The lasting impact extended beyond the specific combat results the weapon achieved. The six-pounder demonstrated that infantry could be equipped with effective anti-tank capability at relatively modest cost, creating defensive capability that didn't require specialized tank destroyer units or expensive self-propelled weapons. This influenced post-war anti-tank weapon development and doctrine, establishing expectation that infantry units should possess organic capability to engage armor rather than depending entirely on support from higher echelons or from specialized units. German tankers who survived encounters with six-pounders remembered the weapon with respect, born from watching their comrades burn in tanks that were supposed to be invulnerable. The small British gun that they'd initially mocked proved deadly in practice, killing German tanks efficiently throughout campaigns across North Africa, Italy, and Northwest Europe. The lesson: that weapons effectiveness couldn't be assessed reliably from appearance alone, that British forces were capable of developing and deploying effective equipment despite earlier setbacks, came too late for the crews who died learning it. The six-pounder that German intelligence dismissed as inadequate proved to be exactly what British infantry needed, deployed widely enough to matter operationally, and employed effectively enough to force German tactical adjustments that benefited British defensive operations throughout the war's latter years.